Sell-off blamed on a Federal Reserve chairman who the president says didn't cut rates enough. Today's on a president who, when it comes to rattling China trade talks, did more than enough. Via a tweet, President Trump promising new tariffs on China that rocked the corner of Wall and Broad within minutes. Stocks reversed what had been a healthy triple-digit gain. Triple-digit losses ended up being the result. And all because the president was upping the trade ante with China, promising to slap 10% tariffs on another $300 billion worth of Chinese goods. Now, that is in addition to the 25% tariffs already in effect on virtually all other Chinese goods. So, come September 1st, that means that tariffs will be in effect on pretty much everything we get from China. Stocks weren't the only thing tanking in the face of this tougher trade war. So was oil, on the prospect that global demand could slide right along with the global economy, which is why interest rates started tumbling and the dollar started tumbling. And one of the few havens in times of a crisis, gold, well, those prices were soaring. So, time to start connecting. We begin with Fox Business's Edward Lawrence on what got everything going. Hey, Edward.
Hey, Neil. Yeah, the tweet heard around the world here, literally. Now, we have learned from Chinese sources within the last half hour or so the meeting in Shanghai did not go well between the two trade teams. In fact, the Chinese sources are telling us that China said they will not add in any of the concession language that they had taken out of the agreement. Now, the Chinese telling us, the U.S. Trade Representative, or telling the U.S. Trade Representative that the U.S. needs to just trust them, that they will protect intellectual property without enforcement provisions. Now, within China, the departments have been given the directive to start decoupling from the United States, so China no longer has to rely on U.S. products. Now, that could be seen in an agreement they made with Russia, basically helping the Russian soybean industry meeting the demand of the Chinese. Now, this is what the president is reacting to by these tariffs, announcing 10% tariff on basically the rest of what China imports into the United States. Now, these tariffs will affect more of what you buy. We're talking about pantyhose or stockings, to alarm clocks and watches, to roller skates. This is a hard line from the White House, is getting an immediate response from Democrats, actually support from those Democrats. Listen.
We have to be really tough on China. They've taken advantage of us. America has lost trillions of dollars and millions of jobs because China has not played fair. And being tough on China is the right way to be.
And the president has done this before, set deadlines and then pushed those deadlines back when China does certain things. This time, though, seems to be a little bit different. China taking a very, very hard line in those talks there, saying they will not add in anything related to the concessions that they had agreed to over the past year. We'll have to see if the president keeps this hard line, September 1st deadline for the next tariffs. Neil?
All right. I can't keep up with it. Thank goodness you can, my friend. Edward Lawrence at the White House. As I said, the president is speaking with reporters as we speak right now before he heads off for a campaign event. When that tape gets into our newsroom, we will get it right to you. Meanwhile, Ted Oakley is following all this and the financial implications of all of this. He's with Oxbow Investors. Ted, good to have you. What do you make of this? And it's a reminder how much trade does dictate trading, doesn't it?
Well, it is, Neil. I think the thing about it, though, this has sort of been a relationship for investors like a Pavlov's dog situation where you ring the bell, they expect something, and then eventually you don't have any food, and that's where you end up. And I think that's what's going on now. And so they get really disappointed.
I'm that way with Ponderosa, but I digress. One of the things I noticed that was interesting is the better things look for trade, the better things look for stocks. In other words, the prospect that a deal could be imminent. This widened it out to pretty much touch, every good that we get from China. I guess the flip side hope is the longer this drags on, the more the Federal Reserve cuts rates to sort of buttress the economy. Do you buy that?
Well, I think they have to cut rates more. We felt like that all along. We thought they were off the mark yesterday. So I assume that by the time you get to October, November, that they're going to be up against the wall. They will have to come in and cut deeper.
So if you're cutting in an environment like this that save the trade impact that's been minimal thus far, you don't have a lot of room here, do you?
You don't have a lot of room. That's one of the problems. If you look back, they were comparing it to mid-cycle 95 to 97. It's not like then. That was a 6%
You're right.
Fed funds rate. So it's a different kind of game right now.
You know, this global slowdown talk, it's always ignited every time you have an impasse on the trade. I was a little bit stunned to see oil like just fall out of bed on the notion this is going to have a global impact way beyond the United States and China. Do you buy that if this drags on very long? That's exactly what happens?
Well, I do, because if you look at the Permian, you look at the Bakken, you look at the places where that's happening, you know, we're starting to see a lot of supply, and I think that will have a big impact on oil during the summer.
You know, the one thing I haven't noticed is that consumer behavior, while it's slowing from its highs, is still pretty robust. Consumer confidence still fairly robust. Wage gains in this country, maybe the underpinning of that, actually quite robust. So we've been able to weather this. How long do you think that lasts?
I would guess in the next 1 or 2 quarters, what you're going to see with the wage thing you're talking about is you'll be in a situation where wages will be going up. Profits will be squeezed, though. It'll have an impact on the markets in terms of stock prices. I think that's where the two are going to run into each other here.
All right, interest rates are going low. Market rates are going low. This situation today, up to send, you know, yields on a 10-year note, a popular mortgage instrument, for example, to fresh 3-year lows. What do you think's going on there?
Well, we said a year ago that, you know, we felt like rates would be going down for the next 18 months, and we still feel like they'll still be going lower eventually. Now, they may break up a little bit here in the short run, but I think what's happening is you have a tremendous amount of debt right now, and when you have that much debt, it's really hard to push things higher. And I think with everything worldwide breaking, you're going to have a situation where we catch up with everybody else.
We'll watch it closely. Ted Oakley, thank you very, very much. It might confuse you when you're looking at a bond quote. It's a little bit in reverse here. You notice the yield goes down. People are buying bonds. Price goes up, yield goes down. So it does catch some people off guard, but just explaining that here. Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris renewing her attacks on the president's trade policies just today.
By tweet, initiating trade policy that has resulted in, as I said last night, farmers in Iowa facing bankruptcy, with soybeans rotting in bins, auto workers in Michigan and in other places of the country that are looking at the potential for no job by the end of the year. American families paying $1.4 billion more a month on everything from shampoo to washing machines because of this so-called trade policy, which I call the Trump trade tax. It's irresponsible.
All right, so the economy has always been going the president's way, and one of his greatest clarion calls is this, his Achilles heel, the trade situation. Fox Business Network's Charlie Gasparino is here, Elizabeth McDonald, the host of Evening Edit on Fox Business, and Catalina Magazine publisher Kathy Arode. Now, Kathy, what she's saying is this is the fly in the president's ointment, this trade thing.
Oh, absolutely. The economy is going great. Why did he go off script? Why did he do this? There's no reason.
Why did he add to this?
Why did he, what this tariff, where did this come from, this 10% tariff? I mean, he could say the economy is great, it's booming, boom, win the election 2020. Now we might have President Kamala Harris, because she's right. I would call it a trade war, not, I don't know what she called it, a tax, but it's a trade war, and no one wins at a trade war, and that's why everyone's nervous.
Well, there's other stuff he's been gaining the advantage, and maybe this is a negotiating tactic. What do you think?
Yeah, that's what he's doing. By the way, Kamala Harris overstated it, saying, you know, auto workers, no one's going to have a job in the auto worker industry.
Right.
She said hundreds of thousands. That was clearly an overstatement. She was talking about the auto supply chain. So, you know, you wonder what the president's game plan is here. You know, the markets, we always say, is 6 months out. Should he get his act together, you know, 6 months ahead of time, meaning people start looking at the election in September, so he needs to act, you know, sooner. You know, so does he have, what's his deadline? Is it by March of next year that he has to get this together? I think, you know, listen, the U.S. stock market is $34 trillion in equity value. The U.S. economy is $22 trillion. Is this $300 billion a drop in the bucket? Can it weather it? That's the question mark. I think that it's interesting the Democrats are now siding with the president, saying he's right, he needs to go tough on China.
You could argue that the Federal Reserve yesterday emboldened this.
Yeah, you could also argue that the Federal Reserve cutting rates is not even the issue. I mean, a quarter point. I mean, listen, you talk to any CEO, what it comes down to specifically is what affects corporate earnings more, a 25 basis point cut in the federal funds rate or these absurd trade wars. And we'll take China out of it. I mean, the market's reacting to a tweet or a statement, and that's what stock traders do. They're stupid. They press the button on any negative news. The real fear in the market is the fact that we're not just at trade war with China, we're at trade war with half the world, okay? And that will impact
It's a
GDP.
slight exaggeration.
China, Mexico, anybody.
But if that were the case, I mean,
Canada,
we would be getting pounded. The economy would be getting pounded.
the economy is down to 2% growth because of trade.
You think trade is doing that?
That's what. Well,
Kathy,
talk to
it
any
almost sounds like
economist.
you.
Yeah, right. We're
Talk to any economist.
agreeing. But I mean, and then now it's a trade war with a country that doesn't have to elect a president. China doesn't care if
Yeah, but I don't
soybeans are
think
over
China-
here.
Do you think
Right.
China waits him
China
out? Kathy,
cares.
the president has argued
Yes,
they
that's
don't
the
want to
point.
negotiate with me. They want to deal with some. What do you say, stiff? Or
What's the
what is
point of it, though?
But do you think that's the case here?
dead person?
Because China's not going to have any breaks.
China has no elections. What do they care? The soybeans are going to rot. They don't
Well,
care.
they have a slowing economy,
Well,
right?
it's not going to affect them. No.
Isn't their economy slowing?
Yeah, it is, and it's pretty rickety and arthritic. Here's the thing: who's got leverage? Who's in the
President
catbird
says he
seat?
does.
And it seems like he is, because we know that manufacturers have been diversifying out of China
Why does he have- why does he
toward
have the
toward
leverage?
other parts of Asia to put their production lines there. So, you know, I just think there's way too much hysteria. And we know that the president's tweets, I mean, algo traders, the traders, every tweet, they make money off of it. It brings back volatility into the market. People like it. But there's too much hysteria and overreacting on what's going on in D.C.
Wait a second. There's one
causing it,
thing to talk about algo traders in the market. There's another thing to talk about GDP.
He's talking about algorithms. Right?
Yeah, people that trade off, the
Right.
algos are attached to certain news items.
And they're
where they-
attached to his tweets.
Right,
That
okay,
was my point.
okay.
I
They're
can
attached to-
hear people turning off
Yeah,
their television.
but there's one thing to talk about. Another thing to talk about GDP. And you talk to CEOs. I do it all the time. They are telling me that their bottom lines are affected by multiple trade wars, and that's the bottom line. And
Yeah,
if
that's-
Do you think this is
if
going to be a pall of the economy, and it's
I
well, good thing the Fed's cutting that?
I can't tell you, because I don't think
right.
anybody can tell you that the tax cuts are going to ameliorate the trade wars. I can't tell you that, but it looks like it's having an impact.
People
Yeah,
are
it is.
nervous.
People are nervous about business investments, what Charlie's trying to say, in GDP. That's what's bringing that number
president
down.
What
is making them nervous.
It's a trade fight
More
and
inventories,
and business investment.
By the way, it goes
Right.
beyond business
But for no
investment.
reason.
It's inventories building up because we can't sell stuff.
And why? Why? Why is he doing it? It doesn't make sense.
Because it needs to be fixed, because it's been a problem festering for
It's not going to
decades.
fix anything.
Peter Navarro thinks it's
Yeah,
a good
the
idea.
one
to-
guy.
to-
Chuck Schumer.
to have a-
All right.
Thank
Chuck
you. Look at the
Schumer.
time, guys. All right. In the meantime, after the dash, after passing the cash, senators are leaving down, but not before slapping tariffs on the remaining goods we get from China. Pretty much everything comes September 1st that makes its way from China to this country. We'll be looking at tariffs of at least 10%. The president addressing that and a lot more with reporters moments ago. Let's listen.
No, I'm not concerned about that at all. I expected that a little bit because people don't understand quite yet about what's happened. We've taxed China on $300 billion worth of goods and products being sold into our country, and China eats it because they have to pay it, because what they do is they devalue their currency and they push money out. Our people haven't paid. As you know, we're also charging them 25% on $250 billion. So we're taking in many billions of dollars. There's been absolutely no inflation, and frankly, it hasn't cost our consumer anything. It costs China. Now, what has happened is a lot of companies are moving out of China so they can, avoid, and China's had a rough this is their worst year in 27 years, according to yesterday's Wall Street Journal. I don't want that. But when my people came home, they said, we're talking. We have another meeting in early September. I said, that's fine. But in the meantime, until such time as there's a deal, we'll be taxing them. We're getting very good numbers from the border. The 21,000 soldiers supplied by Mexico, and I want to thank Mexico. They're doing a great job. The numbers are way down at the border.
On North Korea, sir, on North Korea, they apparently just launched their third missile in about a week. Is Kim testing you?
I think it's very much under control.
Why do you say that,
Very
sir?
much under control.
Will you start negotiations again, sir?
Well, what would you say it is? Let me ask you a question. Right. Sure. What would you say when China, for the last 20 years has been taking hundreds of billions of dollars out of our country. And we had a president that would never do anything, a number of presidents that never would do anything about it. What would you say? For many years, China has been taking money out by the hundreds of billions of dollars a year. We have rebuilt China. So now it's time that we change things around. If they don't want to trade with us anymore, that would be fine with me. Would save a lot of money. No, I don't know. I think President Xi, who's somebody I like a lot, I think he wants to make a deal. But frankly, he's not going fast enough. He said he was going to be buying from our farmers. He didn't do that. He said he was going to stop fentanyl from coming into our country. It's all coming out of China. He didn't do that. We're losing thousands of people to fentanyl. And this was time. And very importantly, for many years, you know this better than anybody. You've been covering it for a long time. For many years, China has been taking out hundreds of billions of dollars a year and rebuilding China. It's time that we rebuild our country.
Do you still trust him, sir? Do you still trust Xi?
And you know, the one thing I have to say, and you have to say this, what China is doing is they're devaluing their currency and they're pumping money out like they've never done before, and they're paying for these tariffs. We're not.
Do you still trust President Xi? Do you still trust him?
I just found our reports that the Chinese army may be returning to in Hong Kong against demonstrators. And what do you say to the accusation that the U.S. is somehow behind?
Well, something's probably happening with Hong Kong, because when you look at, you know, what's going on, they've had riots for a long period of time. And I don't know what China's attitude is. Somebody said that at some point they're going to want to stop that. But that's between Hong Kong and that's between China, because Hong Kong is a part of China. They'll have to deal with that themselves. They don't need advice.
Mr. President, did the U.S. government, sir, Mr. President, sir?
You put a date of September 1 on these tariffs, or you didn't see a chance to negotiate?
No. September 1. The reason is it takes a long time for the ships to come over, and it's a period of time. So I'm giving a four-week period of time before the tariffs go on. But we're now taking in tariffs on 10% on over $300 billion and 25% on $250 billion. And it's been proven that our people are not paying for those tariffs.
So do you still trust President Xi, sir?
Go ahead. Short-range missiles, we never made an agreement on that. I have no problem. We'll see what happens. But these are short-range missiles. They're very standard.
Will you continue negotiating with them, sir?
Go ahead. What?
Sir?
Go ahead.
Reports that the DNI nominee, Congressman Ratcliffe, has embellished his record at all. The Democrats plan to oppose.
Congressman Ratcliffe is an outstanding man, and I'm sure that he'll be able to do very well. I think he's just outstanding. Highly respected by everybody that knows him.
Mr. President, on Cincinnati, sir, on Cincinnati.
What will you do on Huawei?
Well, we've not changed on Huawei. We're not allowing Huawei into our country. We're not changed on that. We can do business for non-security things with Huawei, because that's, you know, we'll do that. But anything having to do with national security, we're not dealing with Huawei.
Mr. President, your rally tonight, sir.
What do you think about the decision to not watch
Well, I haven't actually heard that. I know there's a lot of things going on. That's a piece of it, I guess. But I really don't know. I haven't spoken to them about that. I would frankly be surprised, because what James Comey did was illegal. So I would be surprised, but I don't know anything about that.
Mr. President, in Cincinnati at your rally tonight, are you prepared to tell your supporters to stop if they begin chanting something problematic?
I don't know what's going to happen. I can tell you this. I'm going to Cincinnati. The arena is a very large one, and we've sold it out. We could sell it out probably 10 times from what I hear. The applications for seats, as you know, never had an empty seat. The applications are very big. I have no idea. We have a great group of people. They love our country. They love the job we're doing. And when they see the kind of people that want to represent us from the last two nights, that's not what they want. I don't know. I can't tell you whether or not they're going to do that chant. If they do the chant, we'll have to see what happens.
Will you stop them, sir? You think you will?
I don't know that you can stop people. I don't know that you can. I mean, we'll see what we can do. I'd prefer that they don't. But if they do it, we'll have to make a decision then.
Do you have a message for them now, like before they go in?
I do have a message. My message is for the people I'm going to. So we had over 100,000 applications for whatever the size of the, I think it's a 14,000 seat arena, but we're way over 100 and I think 122,000 applications for those seats. You know what my message is? I love them. And I think they love me. I actually think they love me.
Mr. President, on Bin Laden, sir, Bin Laden.
India has rejected your offer of help on Kashmir. India says Kashmir is a bilateral issue between India and Pakistan.
Have they accepted the offer or not?
They have not.
Well, that's up to, it's really up to Prime Minister Modi. And I met with Prime Minister Khan. I got along great with, I think they're fantastic people. Khan and Modi, I mean, I would imagine they can get along very well. But if they wanted somebody to intervene or to help them, and I spoke with Pakistan about that, and I spoke, frankly, to India about it, but that's been going on, that battle, for a long time.
Mr. President,
But if somebody, if I can, if they wanted me to, I would certainly intervene, yeah.
Sir, was the U.S. government involved in the death of Hamza bin Laden?
I can't comment about that, but he was very threatening to our country. He was saying very bad things about our country. I will let you make your own comment about it.
Can you share anything
but I
about
don't
it?
comment. But I will say, Hamza bin Laden was very threatening to our country, and you can't do that. But as far as anything beyond that, I have no comment.
Mr. President, Robert Mueller said last week that Russia is interfering in U.S. elections right now. Did you raise that with Vladimir Putin?
Oh, you don't really believe this. Do you believe this?
He said it last week. Did you raise that with President Putin yesterday?
We didn't talk about that. I spoke with President Putin of Russia yesterday. They're having massive fires in their forests. They have tremendous, I've never seen anything like it. It's very big. I just offered our assistance because we're very good at putting out forest fires, frankly. And if they should need it, I offered our assistance. We had a good talk, a short talk, but a good talk. And I think he appreciated it. So we would be able to help them. It's these are massive fires like I haven't seen. That was the primary importance of the conversation, and I think they very much appreciated it.
Sir, on the Fed, sir.
Mueller said right now he believes Russia is interfering in the election.
Well, I watched Mueller. I'm not sure Mueller knows what's going on. You want to know the truth? But all I do know is he said no collusion with us, no collusion, and ultimately no obstruction, because it led to no obstruction by a very smart group of people, including our Attorney General. So no collusion, no obstruction. As far as Mueller's performance, you would have to say it was maybe not so good.
On the Fed, sir. Sir, on the Fed. Mr. President, on the Fed, why wasn't a quarter rate cut good enough?
So our country's doing very well. We're setting records in every way, including employment, unemployment. We have now more people working in the United States than ever before. The stock market, it'll take a little hit, but it will be phenomenal, because ultimately it'll be much better because of what I'm doing. Somebody should have done this with China a long time ago. They decided not to do it. They made a big mistake. But I will say this, there's never been a time in the history of our country like we have right now. The highest number of people employed, the best employment numbers for African American, Hispanic, women, for everybody. I mean, the best numbers we've ever had. Our military is being rebuilt, and it's almost fully rebuilt. It's going to be at a level in a very short period of time, stronger and better than ever before, with new aircraft, new missiles, new everything. Hopefully we don't have to use it. Go ahead.
Jay Powell.
What did you think of the Democratic debate last night, Biden, and specifically the charge from Congresswoman Gabbard that you're assisting al-Qaeda?
So, yeah, nobody knows what she meant by that. I think even you probably didn't like that statement, John. She doesn't know what she's talking about. If you remember, a short while ago, I defeated ISIS. We have 100% of the caliphate. So, you know, you're always going to have somebody around. Well, right now we have captured over 10,000. We have 2,500 ISIS fighters that we want Europe to take, because they were going back into Europe, into France, into Germany, into various places. So we have right now 2,500 ISIS that we captured. We've captured 100% of the caliphate, and we've done a big job on al-Qaeda and everybody else. So for her to make that statement is ridiculous, frankly.
Can you still negotiate, sir, with Kim Jong-un,
For
sir?
her to make that statement is so ridiculous, and she's taken a lot of heat on it because nobody has done more against that war than I have. So we have thousands of ISIS fighters that we want Europe to take, and let's see if they take them. And if they don't take them, we'll probably have to release them to Europe.
Can you still negotiate, sir? Sir, can you still negotiate with Kim after what he's done this week?
Say it what?
Can you still negotiate with Kim after what he's done now?
Sure, because these are short-range missiles. We never discussed that. We discussed nuclear. What we talk about is nuclear. Those are short-range missiles, sure. And a lot of other countries test that kind of missile also.
Do you still trust President Xi?
Why was the tariff 10% and not 25? And then on the Fed, you said a quarter point wasn't good enough. What would be good enough for you?
It's so interesting because everyone says, gee, that's so tough, and now you're saying I should have done more.
Well, why
Look,
didn't you do more?
I did more than anybody thought with the first $250 billion, and the 10% is for a short-term period, and then I can always do much more or I can do less, depending on what happens with respect to a deal. But I'm very happy the way it is right now. My people came back. They're going to meet again in September. I said, look, if you meet, that's great. But in the meantime, we're going to pay they're going to pay a tariff, and it'll be a very substantial tariff. Now, if you remember when I did the 25%, I did it in stages. And this can also be lifted ultimately in stages, or it can be taken off. But it can be lifted in stages. So we're starting at 10%, and it can be lifted up to well beyond 25%. But we're not looking to do that necessarily. But this would be done in stages. So I put on 10% on 300. It's approximately 300 billion. We already have a 25% tariff on the first 250 billion. So the 10% follows the 250 billion at 25%.
Sir, Speaker Pelosi, sir. Speaker Pelosi.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Are you considering a blockade or quarantine of Venezuela, given the amount of foreign involvement from Russia, China, and Iran?
Yes, I am.
You are considering?
Yes, I am.
When?
Yes, I am.
Mr. President, Speaker Pelosi, sir.
Smaller hearing. On 9/16, House Democrats said they want to launch a House inquiry. Why do you think that number is?
You know, it's interesting. Nobody's even mentioned this question to me in so long. Until last night at the very end, it wasn't even mentioned in the debates. People aren't even thinking it's a hoax. I don't know if you know that. You know it's a hoax, right? So nobody's mentioned it to me.
Sir?
One thing I will say that you haven't covered. 2 days ago, a highly respected judge in the Southern District of New York in Manhattan came out with a decision on the whole Russia hoax, and he said exactly that. It's a hoax. You ought to read the decision. This is a decision by a judge who's highly respected, who was appointed by Bill Clinton when he was president, and he came out and he said it's a hoax. And that's exactly what it is. This was a case brought by the Democrats against me, and nobody wants to talk about it. You know why? Because it's fake news.
Sir, on your son-in-law, Jared Kushner, sir.
What did you tell about the INF treaty?
We didn't discuss the INF. Mostly we discussed the forest fires in Siberia and other parts of Russia. And I said, look, we have the greatest equipment. If we can help you, let us know. Large sections are burning. And so I said to President Putin, if we can help you, let me know.
But we're pulling out of the treaty tomorrow.
We'll see what happens. By the way, I will say, Russia would like to do something on a nuclear treaty, and that's okay with me. They'd like to do something, and so would I. Say it again.
What's your response to Elizabeth Warren's comment last night that white supremacy should be considered a domestic terrorism?
Well, I think Elizabeth, I've watched Elizabeth Warren, sometimes referred to as Pocahontas, with her phony triad and ancestry that she didn't have. I've watched her, and I don't know, to me she doesn't have credibility. It's possible I'll have to run against her, but everything she did was a fraud. She got into colleges, she got teaching jobs, she said she was of Indian heritage. It turned out to be a lie. So Elizabeth Warren really has a big lack of credibility. The which? I didn't really know. I didn't look. I think that Kamala did not do well last night. I think Biden did okay. He came through. He came limping through, as I say about Sleepy Joe. He limped right through it, but he got through it. He really did. I think he was okay. I think Kamala had a bad night last night, I would say. But it's really boiling down to 4 or 5 of them, let's face it. I don't see anybody coming from there.
You had a message for Poland on the anniversary of Warsaw Uprising.
Well, I have a lot of respect for Poland, and as you know, the people of Poland like me, and I like them, and I'm going to be going to Poland fairly soon. And I know they're building an installation and they're putting in all of the money, 100% of the money. So they're building something very nice for the United States to have. Go ahead, Mike.
Sir, on Nancy Pelosi, I'm sorry, I don't have to yell at you here if you don't mind. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, I don't know if you saw, but she described Jared Kushner as a kind of Baltimore slumlord. Because he owns property there. Do you think your son-in-law bears any responsibility for those
I think the responsibility is the people that have run Baltimore for so many years, obviously headed up by Elijah Cummings. They've run Baltimore into the ground. We've given billions and billions of dollars to Baltimore. The people of Baltimore appreciate what I've done for them by bringing this up. It's the #1 city proportionately in the United States on crime. I saw a statistic where it's worse than Honduras right now.
Have you spoken with
Kushner? And I think what the people of Baltimore, I think they really appreciate what I'm doing. The money was stolen or misspent or wasted. And a lot of things happened, a lot of bad things. But the government for many years has been very good to Baltimore. We have to help the people. Elijah Cummings has not helped the people, but maybe at some point we'll get together and we'll get it straightened out. But what happened in Baltimore is disgraceful. And it's not only Baltimore, it's other Democrat-run cities. And you ought to report on it sometime. Thank you.
All right, the president taking on any and all questioners out there. About 20 minutes worth outside the White House before he boarded Marine One. He's heading out to Ohio for a campaign event tonight. Just real quickly on this ongoing trade tiff that's turned into an outright war with the Chinese. The president effectively announcing today that come September 1st, $300 billion worth of goods we get from China will be slapped with a 10% tariff on top of the $250 to $265 billion worth of goods that already have a 25% tariff on. What that would essentially mean is everything that we get from China will eventually be subject to a tariff. The president hoping to move the needle on the Chinese in the talks, but he says that he's in no rush, says this is the right thing to do. But it did surprise a lot of folks and prompted what had been a triple-digit advance of the markets into a triple-digit tumult. Blake Burman at the White House with the very, very latest. Blake, where do we stand on all of this?
I think it's a good reminder, Neil, as you just said, that we are indeed in the middle of a trade war right now between the United States and China. Let me just sort of walk you through how everything shook out today. Earlier today, here at the White House, there was a meeting. The president was briefed by his team that was over in Shanghai earlier this week about the discussions there, briefed by Steve Mnuchin, Robert Lighthizer, other members of the economic team. After that briefing, that is when we got the statement that was put out on Twitter by the president, in which he said that China is not living up to its expectations to have an ag buy from the U.S., that China is not slowing down the sale of fentanyl that is making its way into this country and killing people all across the country. And the president said he was disappointed with President Xi about it. And that's also when the president announced that come September 1st, which should be days before the next meeting of the trade teams of the United States and China here in Washington, that the next batch, that $300 billion worth of goods, will have a 10% tariff attached to it. What we just heard from the president just now was a reminder that it'll be at 10% for the moment, but it could go up, could potentially go higher than 10%. And as you mentioned, there's also that $250 billion that is currently at 25%. So essentially all U.S. goods or goods coming from China into the U.S. will now face this tariff, and now will face tariffs at least of some kind. And according to my colleague at the Fox Business Network, Edward Lawrence, Chinese sources are telling us that the directive in Beijing now is to quote unquote decouple from reliance on the U.S. You start to add all of this up, Neil, including the comments that we heard from the president now for days that maybe China is trying to wait him out, trying to wait out his presidency, and you got to wonder where things go from here. Neil?
Blake Berman, thank you very, very much. Now to Michigan Democratic Congressman, the Chief Deputy Whip in the House of Representatives, Dan Kildee. Congressman, good to have you. What do you think of this added up the ante, if you will, in the trade war?
Well, nobody wins a trade war. I think we've pretty well established that during the course of recent history. I have said all along, however, that the president was right to take on China, as has now recently been proven again. China doesn't keep his word, or their word. China cheats when it comes to trade, and we have to take them on. I think the president did, however, make a mistake when he began all this by not engaging our allies and taking China on in a unilateral fashion. This makes it easier for China to retaliate. And then finally, let's be clear, one of the reasons that nobody wins a trade war is that a tariff is a tax. And that tax is paid by American companies and American consumers, and it's already hurting the U.S. economy. And that's, I think, why you see some market jitters, because this is not going to be good for the U.S. economy. But it's complicated. Let's give the president credit for taking them on, but let's hope that he can get it right and engage our allies and actually change Chinese behavior.
We're told, Congressman, that the U.S. Federal Reserve charge of interest rates will probably keep lowering them if this keeps dragging on. Now, there's no guarantee of that, as you know. But what do you think of that?
Well, I mean, honestly, I think the Fed has done a good job over both administrations, recent administrations, in helping to do their part to manage the economy. And I think they're doing essentially the right thing. I think Mr. Powell has been responsible. It is worrisome, though, that they now have seen the need to reduce the Fed rate. They only have so much room to go down, and that's one of the reasons that I know that Chairman Powell has been really reluctant to go in that direction, because you get to a certain point and your tools are taken away. But it is an indication that there is some weakening in the U.S. economy when the Fed sees the need to lower the rate.
You know, in your state of Michigan and elsewhere, I mean, the president has pretty solid support among union members and the like, manufacturing employees who feel that if we give up on this fight, they might as well just surrender their jobs. What do you think of that?
You give up on a fight with China?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it would be a mistake to simply walk away. I do think, though, the president needs to consider a different approach. And, you know, while he's on the phone with Mr. Putin, I know he engages with world leaders on a regular basis. When he's doing that, I think he would be wise to ask them to join us in taking on China. We're not the only country that suffers because of the bad practices that China employs. You know, they have a lot more patience than we do, so we have to find other tactics. And you know, I think it would be a mistake to walk away, but what we're seeing right now is simply ratcheting up unilaterally against China with increased tariffs is a tax on American companies and consumers, and the Chinese just have more patience than we do, so we're going to have to engage our allies to try to have much greater heft in dealing with them.
We shall see. Still, the tit for tat goes on. Congressman, thank you very, very much. Good seeing you. We should say, as the Congressman and I were speaking, the U.S.-China Business Council has put out a statement on this extended trade war, if you will, saying that we're concerned today's action will drive the Chinese from the negotiating table, reducing hope raised by a second round of talks that ended this week in Shanghai. The upshot from the business guys is we're worried. More after this. A slam dunk. 23 Republican senators voting against this spending measure that extends the debt ceiling for another couple of years. Indiana Republican Mike Braun wasn't intrigued by this at all. He voted no. One of, again, about 24 Republicans who did so. Senator, very good to have you. Thank you for coming.
Good to be on.
It's on, as you know, and it was passed, and now we're looking at the next couple of years of $1 trillion headed to the deficit for the next 2 years. What do you think?
Well, I think it's kind of what I knew was coming when I got here in the first place, and I understand all the political reasons. We do get normally left kind of holding the bag on explaining about government shutdowns and all the things that go along with trying to hold the line on spending. And I'm just hoping, been here 7 months now, that when we win in November of 2020, we remember the roots of what conservatism is about, and that's not running trillion-dollar deficits, on a budget that's our size year after year when we got all this debt. So hopefully it's a wake-up call. I'm going to keep saying the same thing, and I was glad at least 22 others stood in line to make a strong statement.
Nevertheless, the president, as you know, he's expected to sign off on this, praise the budget deal. He says there's plenty of time to cut. There have been enormous and plenty of opportunities long before you came to Washington, Senator, for both parties, each party at different times under control, and no one ever did anything. So what makes you think that the president and his promise to finding plenty of time to cut will deliver?
He's been here a couple years or so. I remember when I was running back in March of 18, when they did the continuing resolution that re-enabled defense, and I think the president said, we did this last time. He's in now the reality of D.C., to where when you've been doing this for so long, it just gets to be part of the system. And I hope, because I'll be mentioning it to the administration, leadership in the Senate, we can't keep doing it. We're going to lose credibility with the core of who supports us, and it's not people that look at this kind of behavior to where you say the same thing every year and never change it. So it's up to those of us that are new. I know Governor Rick Scott from Florida, Mitt Romney, we're the 3 new business guys in the Senate. We've doubled the business caucus. Maybe voters need to send more of us here. We know how to do a budget, make a payroll, and make the hard decisions.
And some of your colleagues might, but the rap against Republicans is they talk a good game, much like Democrats on wanting to get spending under control, and they do everything. But do you think voters are ticked at both of you?
I hope they are. Democrats believe in this. We end up going along to get along to accommodate defense. I voted against the defense reauthorization bill out of principle, because how do we expect to ever hold the Democrats accountable when we hold defense as being sacrosanct? Believe me, there's waste and ways to cut 1% or freeze it until we get back in order. Neil, that would be the easiest job any CEO in America would have.
Well,
any
you're
governor,
in Washington right
if
now,
that's all
Senator.
you needed to do.
You are in Washington right now, and I know as a former and the man who was supposed to be the successor to Osama bin Laden, to the man now who killed Osama bin Laden, the former Navy SEAL, best-selling author Rob O'Neill. We just found out about something that could have happened quite a while ago, right?
Yes, we put out a $1 million bounty on Hamza bin Laden's head back in February, and some people are saying he may have been killed in a drone strike in March, but others are saying it could have been before that.
Really?
But they're saying, no one's confirming this yet, but it looks like a drone strike because of the lack of hands-on evidence, and you need to rely on so many different types of intelligence in order to confirm. And we want to make sure we confirm he's dead. We don't want to say stuff like the Russians said Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS, was dead, and then he resurfaces. We don't want something like this to happen. And it's so significant because he is more than likely dead, but if he's dead, that kind of wipes out the future leadership of al-Qaeda, because he was more of a millennial generation. He's a 30-year-old. Ayman al-Zawahiri, who's the chief of al-Qaeda now, is a lot older. He's pushing 70, maybe in his 70s. And he just didn't have the charisma or the name or even the ability to kind of stick his neck out, for lack of a better term, to get out there and threaten. And Hamza was the new leader of Al-Qaeda, leader of the Caliphate.
And even before you kill him, the father was grooming him for that.
Right.
When you invaded the compound in Pakistan, when you took out Osama bin Laden, there were other sons at that compound.
Right. Khalid bin Laden was in there. He was the 3-letter agencies that told us about bin Laden said his son would be there on the stairs, and we did find Khalid bin Laden, and some of my guys were able to kill him in a gunfight. And then his brother, I believe it was Syed bin Laden, was killed in a drone strike a couple years prior. And then Hamza wasn't in the building, but we found intelligence in the compound in Abbottabad in 2001 that said Osama bin Laden wanted Hamza to come up to be groomed because he was the most charismatic, and like his father, Osama bin Laden, very charismatic. His people loved him, and he felt the same way about Hamza. And he was going to push al-Qaeda into the future. And hopefully we can confirm this. We will be able to eventually eventually, but it takes a lot of intelligence, signal
How did you
intelligence, human
confirm
intelligence.
Osama bin Laden?
Well, we were able to confirm it because we had his body. After
you have to make sure that was the body, right?
After I shot him and we checked him, we actually got confirmation from an Arabic speaker, one of the Navy SEALs who taught himself Arabic, which is pretty cool. Got confirmation from one of bin Laden's daughters, and what she said was, "That's him. That's Sheikh Osama," is what she said.
Okay.
And then we
and he was a tall guy besides.
Yeah, he was a few inches taller than our tallest sniper. We found out later.
Right, I heard that.
But then we were able to take some DNA. We took his body back, and then we had some forensic people from the FBI test him. We had the pictures. We were able to confirm.
How many sons, daughters did Osama have?
What they say is anywhere between 20 to 26, and it's hard to tell. Just different places, different access. Even the secrecy, like they were pretty secretive, just even from the 80s when bin Laden fought in the jihad against the Russians.
They had a lot of money, right? He came from a $1 billion empire.
Yeah, oh yeah. He didn't build it off terrorism.
I know
it was
that,
kind of
right.
through construction. But even telling Hamza how to get from either Iran or Iran to Pakistan or Saudi Arabia, make sure you do it on a cloudy day. Make sure you don't use certain electronics.
Any of these kids have nefarious?
I mean, it's hard to say. You never know.
Yeah.
I think a lot of them have sort of seen the light, kind of like our friends in the UAE. Like, we can have both. We can have Islam and we can have the West, and we can kind of live a good life with the money that we have, and maybe each of our gods will accept us to paradise in whichever afterlife. Yeah.